August 31st, 1969. 18,500 people packed inside the International Hotel in Las Vegas, every single seat filled, the air thick with anticipation. Elvis Presley was about to take the stage for what would become one of the most talked-about performances of his entire career. But nobody in that room could have predicted what was about to happen. Not the band, not the crew, not even Elvis himself. The lights dimmed. The crowd erupted, and then, in the middle of a song that had everyone on their feet, Elvis did something that made the entire venue fall into complete silence. He stopped, mid-performance, no warning, no explanation, just stopped. And what happened next? It changed everything. If you've ever wondered what kind of man Elvis really was when the cameras weren't rolling, when the image wasn't carefully managed, when it was just him and a moment that demanded something more than a performance, then stay with me, because this story reveals something most people never knew about the King. And if you're discovering stories like this for the first time, make sure you're subscribed to The Hidden Legacy, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what we uncover here. Let's go back to that night. Elvis had just returned to live performing after years away from the stage. Years spent making movies that honestly didn't do justice to what he was capable of. This wasn't just another show. This was his comeback. His chance to prove he was still the king. The pressure was immense. The stakes were higher than they'd ever been, and Elvis knew it. The International Hotel had built an entire residency around him. 57 shows, 2 shows a night. It was a gamble for everyone involved. But Elvis, he was ready. He had something to prove, not just to the world, but to himself. The band was tight. The set list was perfect. Songs that reminded everyone why they fell in love with Elvis in the first place, mixed with new material that showed he wasn't stuck in the past. The energy in that room was electric. People weren't just watching a concert, they were witnessing a resurrection. Then, during one of the songs, Elvis noticed something that made him stop everything. The music kept going for a split second before the band realized what was happening. Instruments fell silent one by one. The backup singers stopped mid-note. The entire production ground to a halt. 18,500 people held their breath. What could possibly make Elvis Presley stop in the middle of his comeback performance? What could be important enough to risk breaking the momentum of the most important show of his career? He saw a young girl in the audience. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, and she was crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from excitement or overwhelming emotion. This was different. Elvis could tell, even from the stage, even with the lights in his eyes, even with thousands of people between them, he could tell something was wrong. Most performers would have kept going. The show must go on, right? That's the rule. That's what professionals do. You don't stop. You don't break character. You don't let anything interrupt the carefully crafted experience you're delivering. But Elvis wasn't most performers. He walked to the edge of the stage. The silence in that massive venue was deafening. People didn't know what was happening. Was this part of the show? Was something wrong with Elvis? Had something gone wrong with the production? Nobody knew. They just watched. And what they saw next, most of them would remember for the rest of their lives. Elvis looked directly at that little girl and asked her what was wrong. His voice, usually commanding and powerful, was soft, gentle, like a father talking to his daughter, like someone who genuinely cared. The microphone picked up every word. 18,500 people heard him ask a child in the audience if she was okay. This wasn't showmanship. This wasn't calculated. This was real. The girl, overwhelmed and probably terrified by the sudden attention, managed to tell him. She had lost her parents in the crowd. She couldn't find them. She was scared, alone in a sea of strangers. And Elvis heard her. What happened next showed everyone in that room who Elvis really was. He didn't just acknowledge her and move on. He didn't hand the problem off to security. He didn't make a quick gesture and return to the show. He stopped everything until that child was reunited with her. Family. He had security bring her parents to the front. He waited. The entire production waited. The band waited. 1,800 people waited. And nobody complained. Nobody got impatient. Because in that moment, everyone understood something profound about the man on that stage. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't about image. This was about humanity. When her parents finally made it through the crowd and that little girl was safely back with them, the relief on her face was visible even from the back of the venue. Elvis smiled. That famous smile, but this time it wasn't for the cameras, it wasn't for the fans. It was for a little girl who needed help, and he gave it to her without a second thought. Then he did something that made the entire situation even more unforgettable. He dedicated the next song to her. He looked right at her and told her that everything was going to be okay, that she was safe now. And then he sang, not as the king, not as Elvis Presley, the superstar, but as a human being who had just reminded 1,800 people what really matters. The applause that followed wasn't just for the performance, it was for the man. People weren't just fans anymore. They were witnesses to something rare, something that couldn't be rehearsed or manufactured. Genuine compassion, real kindness, the kind of moment that reminds you why certain people become legends and others just become famous. But here's what most people don't know about that night. This wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't Elvis having one good moment. This was who he was. Throughout his career, stories like this emerged again and again. Stories of Elvis stopping to help someone. Stories of him giving away cars, houses, money to people who needed it. Stories of a man who never forgot where he came from and never stopped caring about people who were struggling. There's a pattern here that most people miss. Elvis grew up poor, really poor. He knew what it was like to have nothing. He knew what it was like to feel invisible. And when he became the biggest star in the world, when he had more money and fame than he could have ever imagined as a kid in Tupelo, Mississippi, he didn't forget. He didn't become one of those celebrities who loses touch with reality. He stayed connected to the struggles of regular people. That night in Las Vegas wasn't about stopping a show. It was about stopping for a person, one person, in a room full of thousands. That's the difference between someone who's famous and someone who's legendary. Fame is about how many people know your name. Legacy is about how many people's lives you touched. The stories from people who worked with Elvis paint the same picture over and over. He was generous. He was kind. He was aware of the people around him in a way that most stars simply aren't. Backup singers talk about how he remembered their names, asked about their families, made sure they felt valued. Crew members talk about how he treated them with respect, never acted like he was above anyone. Other performers talk about how he went out of his way to help younger artists, giving advice, offering support, using his influence to open doors. This matters because we live in a world where celebrity is often confused with character, where fame is mistaken for value, where being well known is treated as the same thing as being good. Elvis Presley could have been just another famous person, just another star who burned bright and faded, but he wasn't. And that night in Las Vegas is proof. When he stopped that concert, he risked everything. He risked breaking the momentum of his comeback. He risked looking unprofessional. He risked the criticism that would come from stopping a sold-out show for one person. But he did it anyway, because in that moment, doing the right thing mattered more than doing the expected thing. The critics the next day didn't focus on the interruption. They focused on the humanity. Review after review mentioned that moment, not as a flaw in the performance, but as the highlight, because it was. People came to see Elvis Presley perform. They left having seen Elvis Presley care, and that's what they remembered. There's something about witnessing genuine compassion that changes people. It reminds us what we're capable of. It raises the standard for what we expect from ourselves and others. When 1,800 people watched Elvis stop everything to help one scared child, they weren't just watching a celebrity being nice. They We're watching someone demonstrate that no matter how important you are, no matter how much pressure you're under, no matter how much you have to lose, there's always room to care about someone else. If you're watching this, and stories like this resonate with you, if you believe character matters more than fame, make sure you're part of the hidden legacy community. Subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. We're uncovering stories that remind us what real legacy looks like. The impact of that night went beyond the people in the room. Word spread, stories were told. The moment became part of Elvis's legend, not because it was planned or publicized, but because it was real. And in an industry full of manufactured moments and calculated gestures, real stands out. Real lasts. Think about the concerts you've been to. Think about the performances you've watched. How many of them do you remember not for the music, but for the humanity? How many performers have you seen and prioritize a person over the show? It's rare. It's always been rare, but when it happens, you don't forget it. That little girl, wherever she is now, carries that memory. She knows that when she needed help, when she was scared and alone, one of the most famous people in the world stopped everything to make sure she was okay. That's not just a good story. That's a life-changing moment. That's the kind of thing that shapes how you see people, how you see yourself, how you move through the world. And for everyone else in that room, they learned something too. They learned that Elvis wasn't just a performer. He was a person who saw a child in need and responded with immediate, selfless action, a person who understood that his talent and fame meant nothing if he couldn't use his position to help someone who needed it. The rest of that concert was electric. The energy after that moment was different. It wasn't just fans cheering for their favorite star, it was people celebrating someone they respected, someone they admired not just for what he could do, but for who he was. That's a different kind of energy. That's a deeper connection. And Elvis felt it. You could see it in his performance for the rest of the night. He wasn't just performing anymore. He was connecting. Here's what makes this story even more powerful. Elvis didn't tell this story himself. He didn't bring it up in interviews. He didn't use it for publicity. Other people told it. The people who were there. The people who witnessed it. Because that's how real character works. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to be promoted. It simply is. And people notice. We live in a time where every good deed is filmed, posted, shared, where compassion is often performed for likes and views, where the value of an action is measured by how many people see it. But Elvis stopped that concert before social media existed, before viral moments were a thing, before you could turn compassion into content. He did it because it was right, not because it would benefit him, and that makes all the difference. This is part of the hidden legacy, the stories that don't make the headlines, the moments that reveal character, the actions that define who someone really is. If you're someone who values these stories, who wants to see beyond the surface, who believes legacy is built through choices like these, then you belong here. Subscribe, like this video, turn on notifications, and keep watching. What we uncover that night in Las Vegas was more than 50 years ago, but the lesson is timeless. Success, fame, talent, none of it matters if you lose sight of people. If you forget that behind every face in the crowd is a person with struggles, fears, needs. Elvis remembered. In the middle of the most important performance of his comeback, with everything on the line, he remembered. And that's why he's still remembered. The king of rock and roll. That's what they called him. But that night, he was something more. He was a reminder that greatness isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you are when it would be easier to look away, when it would be more convenient to keep going, when stopping costs you something. Real greatness stops anyway. 500 people in tears, not because of a song, not because of a performance, because of a moment of pure, unscripted humanity. Because they saw someone with everything choose to stop for someone with nothing. That's power. That's legacy. That's what the hidden legacy is all about. As we close this story, take a moment to think about your own life. When have you stopped? When have you chosen someone else's need over your own convenience? When have you risked something to help someone who couldn't help themselves? These are the moments that define us. These are the choices that create legacy. And if there's one thing Elvis Presley teaches us, it's that those moments matter more than any stage, any spotlight, any applause. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed to The Hidden Legacy. Hit that like button. Turn on notifications, and check out the videos appearing on your screen right now. They're filled with more stories like this, stories that reveal what real character looks like, stories that remind us what matters. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about more than just the surface. This is The Hidden Legacy, and this is what we do.